like everyone to make sure that your cell phones, your mobiles, pagers, everything is turned off. We are videotaping tonight and we don't want any cell phones ringing in the middle of this. And it's disturbing when you're listening to an answer. I'd like to welcome you tonight to the Neighborhood Council's Primary Candidate Forum. I'm Ray Palmer. I have the privilege of being the president of the Neighborhood Council. So let me tell you how we arrived at tonight. As the quality and the quantity of candidates started lining up, we decided we have to have a forum so that we could present a place that all of the people in the community that were interested could come and listen to the candidates on the issues. So we formed a steering committee, and the steering committee consists of Tom Dreisbeck, who lives in North Davis Shores, Judith Seraphim, raise your hand, Lincolnville, Becky Greenberg, where are you, Becky? Right there, Flagler Model Land, and Kathy Schirmacher, Uptown. So the job for the five of us was to decide venue, format, question, how we're going to do all of this. So before I introduce the candidates to you, what we decided on the questions was that we would go out citywide over a period of a number of weeks to collect questions from all of you. And I would like to thank those of you who did submit suggestions. We got, I don't know, several hundred questions submitted. And from those several hundred, we took and analyzed those down to what are the overarching issues, what are the concerns that seem to cross neighborhoods that are around the city, so that we could formulate questions from those issues. So the questions that you hear tonight are a result of us going out to all of you to gather the information. None of the candidates have received any of these questions in advance. So they're as much in the dark about what we're going to ask as all of you are. So no one has been privy to anything. Tonight is really not about getting to know the candidates personally or their resumes or their history. This is about the issues that have been identified by all of you as residents and taxpayers and voters of the city of St. Augustine. So on the back table, if you're interested in a candidate, you will find information on all the candidates on the table in the back. You can collect that information, you can go to their website, you can talk to them at the end of the forum tonight. Tonight is really a two-way learning experience. It is a learning experience for all of us as we listen to the candidates respond to the questions. And it is a learning for the candidates as they hear from us what are the big issues that are on people's minds. What are the cross-cutting things that people are concerned about around the city? So now I would like to introduce for the open seat, which is seat 4, Ron Bourbon. Todd Neville. John Valdez. And for seat 3, which is also for the mayor, our incumbent, Joe Bowles. Ken Bryan. Nancy Shaver. So the candidates have drawn straws to see who will start with the first response tonight, and after that we'll rotate so that everyone has an opportunity to answer first. So the first question will be a lightning round. And that's just to get everybody warmed up, so it's 1 minute for a response. After that, all of the other questions will be 2-minute responses. And we will be very strict about the time. When there is 30 seconds remaining, Andrew Schermacher will hold up the 30-second sign so that you know to wrap up your thoughts. Because at the end of the time, I will stop you and we will move on. Also, when you hear the ding,
can everybody hear that?
Everybody hear that? Okay, all right, good. Tonight is being videotaped. It will be posted on YouTube. So for folks that you know that couldn't be here tonight, they will be able to go on YouTube and watch it, hopefully sometime by tomorrow. Okay, after the interview, after the official forum, the candidates will be available for individual questions as they mingle around the room. So without further ado, we are going to start with the first question for seat 4 with, who's starting? John Valdez. What is the appropriate role of tourism in our city?
First I have to master that, don't I? Appropriate role for tourism in our city. There's lots of things we could talk about. I think the most important thing we need to talk about is how we can get the tourists who come to visit here, who love this place, which we all were when we first came here, tourists, how we can get them to contribute more to the city coffers to help offset the cost of them being here and to also offset our ad valorem taxes, which sooner or later are going to be forced up. So most importantly, we need to find a way to collect more money without, of course, forcing them away.
Thanks, John.
Tourism, that's the basis of what we do here in St. Augustine, and that's how a large amount of our money comes from here. But we also have to get the tourists around, and we have to give them a decent walking area, get them around so they can get around easy enough so they can spend their money to come in here. And with transportation issues or whatever, which we have a really problem with, but we'll take care of that later on this afternoon probably. But tourism is the mainstay with our dollars and cents and our income that we bring into this city. So we have to take care of the tourists.
All right, thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Tourism really is the result of why St. Augustine is great. From the history, from the beautiful streets and homes that we have here, from the Fort St. George Street, all of that is why we have tourism here. It brings tourists here to spend their money here. Those tourists result in each and every one of you out there. There are very few of us that were born here in St. Augustine, so most people come here as a result of tourism. And on the economic side, tourism impacts our community greatly. It's one of our largest industries. About 24% of our economic drivers are from tourism. So as a whole, tourism has a huge impact here in St. Augustine.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, the first question for seat 3. We hope. Oh, don't go. No advance warning here. Technology's great, you know.
Ken, is that on?
Okay, the question is,
Right.
The mic's not working.
and we'll start with Ken. Mic not working?
It is. Turn it on. Start talking.
When you start talking, it works?
Can you hear that?
Yeah. Okay, the question for you, why are you running for mayor?
I'm running for mayor because I think there needs to be some change in the city. I think the mayor position is a position of leadership that sets the pace for the way that the other commissioners work, and also sets the pace on how the planning of the city is going to actually function. Having had over 40 years of experience in the government to include federal, state, local, and regional, I bring a lot of experience to the city, which covers a number of areas. A number of areas from fiscal responsibility to budget, to personnel management, actually also into procurement and contracts. So there's a lot of things that I can do. I've already started drafting some of the policies and procedures in order to work on infrastructure. And also one of the things I like to see is the city to be more resident friendly, because that's very important as well. Tourism is very important, but being friendly and making the city a place for the individuals that live here is more important.
I think there's really only one reason to run for mayor, and that is that you believe that I am the person that you can trust to represent your interests. When I think about it, and I've thought about it a lot, it's the first time I've done this, I listen to residents and they've told me, and I think we all know it, that the city is really at a tipping point. I had one resident tell me that it's like we've been whipping up the frosting, but we haven't baked the cake yet. So just like any place you love, you want to take care of it. And to me, that's the job of the mayor, of all of us, of the city commission. I've done this my whole working life. I've listened to people, I've put facts in front of them, and helped create practical solutions. I love this place, and that's why I'm running for mayor.
Joe?
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Well, this will be my last term as mayor. And I want to finish what we've started. And I'm not just talking about the 450th celebration next year, although that's a big part of it. I'm talking about the importance of the 450th as telling our story. It's our history. It's St. Augustine. We're proud of it, and we want to tell it, and people are coming and listening. People are flocking here. But I'll tell you something you don't know. The 450th takes up 1% of our budget. We're doing a lot with a little bit. But the team that we have built since I took office in 2006 as mayor, as the economy plummeted, we've got job creation, we've got economic development, and we've got business coming in. We've got people filling our neighborhoods, rehabbing houses, rehabilitating the streets. The city's in partnership with everybody. I want to see that continue. This Lincolnville CRA just got started. So we want to finish. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to question 2 for seat 4. And it will be Ron who's first here. A major issue facing neighborhoods is deferred maintenance for infrastructure. Streets, storm sewers, water lines, sidewalks, underground utilities, with the cost rising each year as more and more is deferred. What is your specific plan for correcting this problem?
Well, where I come from and the industry that I was in, we look down on deferred maintenance. There should be no deferred maintenance. It's sometimes it has to be because of money situations or whatever, but deferred maintenance is a death knell to a city. What we have to do is we have to stay on top of the streets. We have to stay on top of the infrastructure. We have to stay on top of these things. We cannot let it go because next year it's going to cost twice as much as it did this year. So we have to, the money has to come from someplace, and we have to do it and get it done and get it over with. Because in a city like this, the maintenance is continuous. When you start working your way from one end of the city to the other end of the city, you have to go back to the first end. It's like when I paint these bridges. It never ends, and you can't let it end.
So the question is, how will you address this?
How will I address it? Well, first off, we have to organize our folks, Mr. Reagan, and we have to organize him and let him know how we think about these things.
Tell them.
I am telling them. But seriously, we do have to stay on top of it, and what it is, it's just you push, and there's money that comes from, there's all kinds of grant money, where we get the grant money from. All we have to do is look for that grant money. And it's in there. We got CCP, you got all these different outfits that come up with tax-free money, and that's where you have to find the money to stay after this deferred maintenance. Or no deferred maintenance.
All right, thank you, Ron.
Deferred maintenance ultimately comes from how you prioritize as a city. When you look at the priorities of the city, they're reflected in an area that's near and dear to me. Being a CPA, I love budgets and I love financial statements. So when you look at the financial statements of the city of St. Augustine, one of the things you'll see, and you can drill down into the specifics of it, but one of the areas that I'm really concerned about is when you look at the amount of money we're spending on our streets. Right now, and we'll go into CPA land here for a second. Right now, we depreciate our streets at about $100,000 a year. It's technically $97,000, but about $100,000 a year. Generally speaking, in a good economy, you want to see 2 times depreciation being reinvested in that asset. Well, right now, what are we reinvesting? We're reinvesting at 1 times. We have budgeted, coming up for 2015, we budgeted $100,000. So what's going to happen is we're going to continue to see that deferred maintenance grow. What we need to do, as far as to answer Ray's question, to focus on this deferred maintenance issue, is to realign our budget and really look at how we're spending money. One of the things that I looked at when I looked at the financial statements is we're depreciating our streets over 25 years. That might be fine for GAAP, but I don't think anyone in here thinks that a street is lasting for 25 years. That being said, that means that our $100,000 in investment in street repair over the next year is vastly, vastly under budgeted. What we need to see is we need to see about 2 times depreciation in any 1 year. So let's say streets last for 12 years. That would mean that we need to be investing about $400,000 per year in streets. And a budget is simply a reflection of what our priorities are. We need to realign our priorities.
Well, what Todd says resonates with me. It has a lot to do with it. It's very important. How do you pay for it when you need it? And we need to look at how we are paying for our things and where the money's coming from. But, you know, from where I come from, which is building, we deal with critical paths. We deal with putting things together, looking down the road 5, 6, 8, 10, a year, 2 years. We figure out how things work, then we deliver later on, hopefully making a profit, hopefully having enough to cover the warranty. My critical path with deferred maintenance, and by the way, I congratulate the city. Right now, we're doing a good job. Martha Graham's doing a good job. John Reagan's doing a good job. We came out of several years of not working on our infrastructure. And there was a lot of money saved, but a lot of money wasn't spent where it should have been, and now we're kind of paying for it a little bit. What we need to do is we need to identify the neighborhoods that have the critical need. We need to create a critical path. What needs to be fixed first? And how can we go about doing it? And we basically put together a list based on need. Then we identify that with how are we going to finance those needs, and we go to work in prioritizing and working through it. This is not rocket science, this is construction. Okay, this is like building pyramids, which is kind of like what I do. And you know, you have to identify what needs to be done first, what's most critical, what affects the most neighborhoods, what's going to cost us the most, and what do we have money for to address. Then we need to go find the money, okay? A lot of what Todd says resonates with that. Then we need not to get so far behind the power curve again. What Ron's talking about, deferred maintenance. We can't afford to defer. You defer, it's like not taking care of your car. You don't put oil in it. Change oil regularly, you buy a new engine. That's what we're doing right now. We're buying a lot of new engines. Thank you.
Okay, seat 3, and Nancy, you're up first. What is the legacy that you intend to leave to our city?
First, it's not about me. This is a question for all of us. It's what is the legacy that we want to leave for the city? What makes this city is not the fact that the buildings have been here for 450 years. It's that it's been a livable city where people have lived and worked for 450 years. So the legacy, it's our responsibility. It's taking care of this place. We just talked about streets. It's really taking care of every piece of this place and doing it in such a way that we all participate in making decisions about that. So if there's
You personally.
me personally,
Yeah.
I really
What
don't
is the
think legacy
legacy?
is about me. I mean, what is important is that we set ourselves on a course that takes care of the city, takes care of our neighborhoods, and have a participative process that's clean, clear, that everybody gets to play. So if there is a legacy, it's about running the city well, representing the city well, taking care of all of the people who live here, taking care of all the buildings. So it's about recognizing that we perhaps have not done that in the best possible way, and it's time to do it. It's time for everyone to pitch in and do that. Is that close enough?
John?
Well, that is a tough question if you're talking about your legacy. We don't really leave legacies in community service. We do what we do, and we hope that it makes life better for us while we're here, and then when we're done, we hope we can appreciate our work. It's a we. I mean, it's a city commission, it's a city council, it's a staff. I mean, there's no legacy that Joe Bowles is going to leave. What are some of the things I'm proud about what we've done? Well, you're standing in one of the buildings right now. Look at that pool out there. Am I proud of that? Sure. Our whole commission's proud of that. I'm proud that we have a permanent moratorium from the state of Florida and FSDB that they'll never try to grab another piece of property in the neighborhood. I'm excited that a lot of people in this country know that this is where the American culture began. This is the melting pot. This is ground zero for America. A lot of people don't know that, and they're learning more and more. And I find that people in our own city don't know, but when Pedro Menendez landed here, we want the world to know he had free Africans, he had enslaved Africans, 5 types of Hispanics, Italians. We're trying to document the first Jewish family. This is ground zero for America, and I want the world to know that. So if we as a community want to leave a legacy, we need to take our place in history and let Jamestown know that they just came on kind of late. And that we did it in a way that we can hold our head up and be proud of our hospitality to the millions of visitors. And I'll tell you something about visitors. They bring $765 million to this county, and we need to get our share. And we're not going to stop them from coming if we add additional taxes and fees. Why is bed tax the only way we directly beverage and food needs to be explored?
Okay, thank you, John.
I have to agree with both Nancy and Joe that the legacy isn't about me. It's about actually being able to work with your fellow commissioners, working with the city managers, and working with other agencies in order to put in place policies, procedures, strategic plans, and things of this nature that would actually help improve not only the way that the city is run, but it also helps to address some of the things the previous question was about, capital improvement plans. This is very important because when you start putting capital improvement plans in place, you're actually starting to plan for those things that you need. So that's the legacy that you use, is actually being able to develop the policies, the procedures, the strategic plans, and all the things that are necessary to keep the city continuing to run once you have left. This is a 2-year term, so there's no guarantee that you're going to go beyond that. So you have to get in there, you got to get moving as quick as possible and get these things working. The very important thing to work about, or to keep in consideration, is the ability to be a team player and work with other entities, work with other government agencies. And that's one of the things that I would consider to be a legacy. When I was a county commissioner chairman, I spent many times going over to Tallahassee And the reason for that was because I basically established relationships over there that were responsible for making those funds available at the federal level and the state level. Those are the kinds of legacies, but it worked with the other commissioners. So the legacy is being able to work with others and develop those policy procedures and all things necessary to keep the city going once you have moved on and you've gone to another job.
Okay, question 3 for seat 4. Another of the major issues facing neighborhoods is traffic management and parking. How will you specifically manage this issue? Todd.
You know, I've got a great asset in this way. My wife is actually on the North Florida Transportation Organization as the city's representative. We know Nancy Sykes-Klein is on there as the chairman, but my wife is the citizen representative. So what that does is that gives me basically a surrogate in this area. So let's talk about what we're talking about here. And I think traffic is the leading issue here over parking, because congestion, if we bring people into the core to have them park in the core, it's going to create more congestion, which we're already at capacity. When you look at the historic city that we're in an area where we cannot expand our roads any wider. We can't have any more cars get through the system. So what we have to do is we have to change our mentality. We have to stop thinking about cars going through the system and think about human beings going through the system. And how do we do that? We do that with multimodal. We need to, and one thing, I've talked to a lot of you walking the neighborhoods, and you've heard me say this over and over. You've heard me say there's no silver bullet to this answer. What we need is we need to pull off 5%, 10%, 5% here and there, and the way to do that is to capture the tourists before they get into the core. Because what it's doing right now is by driving the tourist into the core, we are causing congestion on all our arteries, both neighborhoods and your Anastasia Boulevard, your San Marco, and your King Street. So we need to move forward on satellite parking and keep pull off some of the tourists in satellite parking so they're not coming into the core.
Again, I agree with Todd on that. Actually, if you go to my website to vote for John Valdez, you'll see a blog on there called "The Genie's Out of the Bottle Looking for a Parking Space." And what I talk about there is satellite parking and the advantage of satellite parking, because we put it out at the ends of our entry corridors, which are pretty careful the term entry because it implies you go through to get someplace else. It will revitalize those areas. For instance, we have a parking area out by the alligator farm, and you have trams or trolleys running back and forth. They're going to be running at a lower speed. It's going to allow people to take interest instead of just zipping through, and it will help properties become more valuable, which means they become more valuable, which means they become more taxable, which offsets or ad valorem taxes again. Another thing I want to talk about is the private sector getting into the parking business. We happen to know right now we have people in the private sector setting up a 50-spot parking lot with a tourist information center and a relationship with the trolleys. There's money in their cars. Let's get the private sector making that money and paying taxes on it. The other thing I want to talk about, this came to me in a meeting the other day with some kids that work downtown in a gallery. They said, why can't we go online and buy a park and ride pass with a PayPal, print it out, put it on our windshield, park in the parking garage, and get out and present it to a trolley or a train and ride to work instead of parking in neighborhoods and having every 3 hours go out there and stuff. Oh, by the way, the little plastic cards. The problem with the plastic cards, you can't find a parking place to go get one. So, there's lots of things that can be done with this. And of course, we also need to talk to our friends at Flagler College about maybe a parking garage or someplace and providing transportation for their students. Good idea. I think they'd probably do it.
Well, this is an area that I like. I really enjoy this area because there's more things we can do about parking, traffic, And I think most of our traffic isn't the tourist traffic. They come in and go to the hotel, they walk around. A lot of our traffic is from the greater St. Augustine area. The May Street traffic goes out to Volano Beach. They go to the landing over there for their boats, the boat landing. There's parking issues, parking garages. I agree with John and Todd about the parking garages. But we have to make a better city. We have to make a city that's easier for walking, for cycling. We live in this city. There are two basic peninsulas. I live on one of them, and there's one of them over in Davis Shores. And why can't we have a water taxi that brings us back and forth for some of the things? That would alleviate a lot of that parking. It's our red light system. It drives me crazy when I drive around and look at these red lights, the way they operate. They don't seem to be syncing from one area to the next. You know, you have traffic managers, you have traffic engineers that can help us out and help us with our traffic situations. But I do not believe it's a tourist. It's part of it, but I believe it's the greater St. Augustine area, people going through our city to get to one place to another through our entry streets or entry corridors. So it's, other than that, parking garages. I understand a parking lot next to or across the street from the post office is for sale. Why can't we look at that? Put a parking garage on West St. Augustine and shuttle people back and forth. I guess I'll finish.
All right. Thank you, Ron. Okay, we're ready now for question 3 for seat 3. Flagler College is having an impact on the entire city through increased enrollment and building density and removal of property from tax rolls. How do you intend to balance this expansion with the interest of tax-paying residents? Joe.
Well, Flagler College, I'm a supporter of Flagler College in our community, much in the same way that William and Mary supports Williamsburg. There's a lot of synergy there. Does it have an impact on the city? Sure it does. And as far as taking property off the tax rolls, it does that. The city doesn't pay tax, the churches don't pay tax. So we have more property in our city off the tax rolls than most. So much that we get a check each year from the state of Florida. Now, Flagler College uses police protection. Flagler College pays a fee to the city of St. Augustine for that police protection. All nonprofit businesses or institutions have to pay a fire assessment fee per square foot. You want to take a look at raising it? I remember voting to quadruple it. We quadrupled it at one point. Maybe it needs to go higher. They do need to pay their share. All the institutions do. Now, the impact that you're talking about, if you're talking about moving into neighborhoods, buying property, taking it off the tax rolls, establishing new buildings, we've got laws and ordinances. And unfortunately, when I have to vote, I vote to uphold the law. And if we need to change those ordinances, then we change them. But I will pledge to you that I will follow the law every time. I'm an attorney, that's how I'm made, and that's how I have to do it. I know the vote was unpopular, but I didn't like doing it any more than anybody else, but the law is the law. So we've changed some of those ordinances, especially the notification to neighborhoods on the PUD. The PUD notification now, before it gets to the point where it's becoming public, you get notified. That man right there is going to get a notice for anything that affects any residential area. And he's going to communicate it to you. And then the responsibility is for you to come up and let us know what you think about it. Thank you very much.
Having been an adjunct professor at Flagler College, I'm a friend of the college, of course. But I think that it's very imperative that we continue a good relationship with the college. One of the things that could probably be done is to start encouraging the college itself to start looking at property outside of the city limits. I mean, this is something that could actually be done. One of the last things we want to do is to drive the college out of the city itself and drive it out of St. Johns County. That's what happened to Florida Memorial College. And like you said, where it is now, it's down in the university, it's down in Flagler, down in Miami. But I think that one of the things we can do is, and I would intend to do this, knowing Dr. Hebert and some of the staff there, is to actually start locating or looking for some properties outside of the city limits and encouraging them to use that for not only parking, but also for possibility of dormitory space and possibility of classroom space as well. This is a possibility. They don't have to stay within the city limits. With the transportation that they could probably provide, as well as the county, through some of the systems that we could actually employ, there could be revenue streams that could be generated from the college, and they would be very welcome to start to continue to expand the college. The college has full intentions of expanding. Their class roll, the enrollment is increasing, and they're going to continue to grow. And that's one of the things we need to do, is look at the positive things of working with the college so that there's a win-win. There's a revenue stream for the city, possibly for the county, and then also the college can expand and do the great things they're doing with the great programs that they have. I love the college. I think it's a great college. They have great programs there, and the last thing we want to do is run them out of town or not work with them. So those are my solutions as far as starting to negotiate and start a conversation with the college staff and the president.
Flagler College and all the nonprofits we have in our island of a city take up 40% of our real estate. What that means is we have 40% that's not taxable. We all love being in a college town. It's a good thing, a wonderful thing. The reality is that Flagler has $113 million worth of property, and it pays $170,000 in the assessment fees and the 2 policemen that Joe referred to. In many cities where you have a footprint like that, what is done is that a university will do payment in lieu of taxes. If Flagler were to do something like that, typically it's about 50%. Right now, if they were to pay taxes, it's about $1 million would be what they would pay to the city of St. Augustine. They're paying $170,000. So clearly there's an opportunity to enter into the right kind of dialogue with Flagler that respects who they are and who we are. But we have, as we just heard, a lot to pay for in terms of infrastructure that hasn't been touched in about a quarter of a century. And we need to think about many ways in which we can get revenue. And Flagler is a citizen too. Flagler is part of our community. And paying their fair share is extremely important. In terms of the expansion, they own 41 properties, of which I think it's 7 or 8 are actually commercial at this point. In other words, they're paying full taxes. That potentially allows for an expansion of the 3 things they want to do: parking garage, dormitory, science building. Those all require PUDs, and I think we need to think very carefully about what makes sense for our city and what makes sense for Flagler and what makes sense for us as residents.
I'd like to thank you, candidates, for adhering to the time limits that we've set. It's a lot of information to cover, but really appreciate it so we can get through all of this. Okay, question 4 for seat 4. Current city codes and enforcements do not adequately protect neighborhoods from business and institutional encroachment. How will you address this issue?
You know, I've sat on the Planning and Zoning Board for, I guess, a total of 12 years now, and I've been on HARB, I've been on Code Enforcement. Board of Justice and Appeals, 22 years of being on boards. In those 22 years, I've sat and wanted to kill things, change things, deny things, never had the ability to do it because I didn't have the laws at my beck and call, because we didn't have laws to address them. Now, of course, the first thing that jumps to mind right here is the 7-Eleven debacle. Okay, we all drove past that sign for years, said for sale. None of us thought about checking to see if you could build a 7-Eleven and a bunch of gas pumps there. Turns out you can. Well, one of the things I want to do, I've been wanting to do it for a long time, is look at our zoning codes and our building codes, go back and address the things where we're short. We are way short in places. We have a building code that was adopted in '75, a zoning code about the same time, and part of the Planning and Zoning Board's problem is the fact that we're dealing with things. If our code was up to date and tight, we wouldn't have to deal with it because it would be before the Planning and Zoning Board. We have to go back And it's a boring, tedious job. It's going to cost money, but it's something that has to be done. It's the fundamental building block of a city, is the regs, the laws, as Joe says. If you don't have the laws, you can't enforce them. And first thing we've got to do to adequately protect neighborhoods is go through and look at what can and cannot be done in those neighborhoods. And if it doesn't make sense in real time, today, boots on the ground, we change it. We address it ahead of time. It's called being proactive versus reactive. We've been reactive for too long. We've got to get ahead of the power curve. And doing that is going to be tiresome, but the time is now.
Well, zoning is, I've been on the zoning boards where I come from for about 7.5 years. And we dealt with all kinds of things, with nothing compared to this right here. We have to keep these, so we have to, these PUDs, they come out every so often, and basically what that is, that's the right to move something from one place to another in the zoning laws or whatever. I'm not that astute here now with the zoning laws, as John is. He's been working with this for 25 years. I will get up to speed on these zoning laws and excuse me. It's you have me at an end here because I can't think about anything to do with this zoning in here in this town here. So I have to apologize for that.
We have two issues here. We have, as many of you know, we have 7 historic overlay districts in the city that are protecting our neighborhoods as well as they can based on how those overlay districts are written. Those then rely on what the planning and zoning code enforcement is. And I was talking to an engineer today, and he brought up exactly what John brought up was, you know, if what we need to do is we need to go back and go look through what those codes and what those ordinances are so we don't end up with a situation like we did with the 7-Eleven. Those two things, focusing on the historic overlay districts and focusing on the planning and zoning, doing a refresh or a review of those two things, I think is the most important thing to achieve what the residents of St. Augustine want in their neighborhoods. And hopefully we can get some of the advice from the planning and zoning after 22 years. This hopefully could have been communicated. So we'll try to make that change.
Okay, now we'll look at seat 3, question 4. We are at a tipping point in our city over the business of tourism, with the true cost burdensome to residents. How will you correct this imbalance? Ken?
And one of the things that we can do, and having served on the Tourist Development Council for 4 years and actually was responsible for, to a great extent, of rewriting and reorganizing the Tourist Development Council, there are some things that we can do in a city very similar to what they do in other municipalities, and that is basically passing on some of the costs to the individuals that come here to visit. This doesn't mean that the residents themselves would have to absorb this cost, because if you ever go to Disney World or any other number of places, you'll see on your receipt there are a number of different kinds of fees that are being assessed. There could actually be a historic preservation fee that the city could actually impose, which would actually help to address some of the infrastructure and some of the things that's going on within the burden that's being passed on to the residents. And you're right, the greatest extent or the greatest portion of the revenue that's coming into the city right now is from taxpayers like us and yourselves. And this actually needs to be offset by passing it on to the tourists. The tourists expect to have to pay for the enjoyment of this beautiful city. It's not that much, but even if it was like 10 cents or $1, it could be any number of any price points that you wouldn't put on it, but that could actually be passed on. So that's one of them actually working on correcting the imbalance is looking at that and actually applying that. You can actually put together some of the data and some of the statistics that's actually provided by the Tourist Development Council in order to assess and determine what would be the appropriate fee, if you will, for that kind of a fee to be passed on. But it's not unfair, and it's not that great right now, because we only have the Tourist Development Council fee that's passed on right now. I think a historic preservation fee would be absolutely would be appropriate and the right thing to do in order to address some of the issues you're talking about right now.
This is one of my favorite subjects. I think many of you know that I like numbers. We really don't know how many tourists come to this city. The first thing we need to do to correct an imbalance is have a set of facts to work from. We don't know whether, as Ron said, it's people who are coming from the county. We have growth in the county. We don't know whether it's people passing through. We use as counts the number of cars that go through the city. We need to have real facts about the tourists. That said, it's clear there are costs associated with tourism that we haven't tracked in 10 years. The last time we calculated that cost, it was 1.6 million. So we know it's costing us money. Right now, for example, extra street cleaning is required in the tourist areas. Martha Graham told me that she spends about $250,000 a year doing that. In many cities that have tourist districts, it's standard practice to have a special assessment district for the businesses that benefit from tourism and incur these extra costs. So that's one lever that we have. Another lever that we have is we collect franchise fees from the trolleys. Right now, that's about 1.3 million a year. And we have the way that the agreement is written, it can go to 5%. Right now, it's at 3%. So we have ways to get additional revenue. There certainly are additional fees, as Ken mentioned, might be a historic preservation fee. There are other ways to do it. Tourists are amazingly price insensitive. They can have, they'll pay a lot for parking. When I lived in Old Town Alexandria, which was a very similar place to this, bounded by water, you wound up paying a lot if you were a tourist to park, particularly if you parked in the wrong place. So there are lots of levers that we have, and we should use them.
Well, if you remember how much it took to get a parking garage built, you'll see the struggle of the city whenever something new comes along. But I'll tell you, a parking garage is a way of managing our visitor experience that has generated a ton of revenue for us. Our street metered parking is the second highest revenue source into our general fund after property tax. And if you look at the property tax, 28% is paid by homestead owners. And you say, well, wait, that can't be right. Well, sure it is. Look at the houses that have residential use that are owned by absentee owners, renting it out. You've got them in your neighborhoods, everybody. That's a commercial use. But 28% is a good number for homestead owners. I'm a homestead owner. My mother's a homestead owner. We want to keep that low by generating revenue from the visitors. Our parking garage, when we went from $7 to $10, got us an extra $1 million. And we've got Park Now cards that we can park there for $3. So it's a great source. You know, I've been advocating a Williamsburg-style food and beverage tax because you're exactly right. Every one of you, when you travel, you don't look on that ticket to see if you paid an extra $1 for your food and beverage, but it's a tax. So we got to know our way around the state to get approval for a tax. You got to have friends in Tallahassee, and we've built a good network of friends in Tallahassee. That's why we keep getting grants. That's why we're after CDBG grants. And that's an expertise that we can't lose the synergy of our team and how it's built those relationships in Tallahassee, because that's what we need to add extra revenue to our coffers. And absolutely we can do it. We've already got it as one of our strategic plans for next year, food and beverage tax. So this is a great commission and a great team we have, and I want you to keep us in place. Thank you.
Okay. We're ready for question 5 for seat 4. In order for you to feel successful in your role as a commissioner, what will you accomplish? Ron.
Well, the one thing we'd like to accomplish is to fix our traffic problems. That's number one on our list. And what I'm trying to do right now, I'm working with FEC and All Aboard Florida to bring either an Amtrak train or All Aboard Florida train here to St. Augustine, as we had back in the 50s. It's the door is not open for that, but it is cracked. We went up and we met with the Executive Vice President, Mr. Cumber for FEC, and he is in charge of this All Aboard Florida. I don't know if anybody, you folks know about All Aboard Florida, but they're going to operate trains between Miami and Orlando in phase one. Miami, Orlando, and also bring in Jacksonville could be phase two, and that's what we're looking for. And that's basically what I really want to do, is to bring Amtrak trains or intercity passenger trains to St. Augustine, and I'm working very hard at that.
All right, thank you, Ron.
I'll start with the warm and fuzzy. The thing that I really want, I have a 2-year-old, and I want that 2-year-old to be able to enjoy the same St. Augustine that I grew up in, that I've lived in now for 24, almost 25 years. And so that's the warm fuzzy. But then we need to talk about specifics. And the specifics that we want to talk about are number one, and we talked about it early on with the deferred maintenance. We need to set our priorities where our core municipal services are number one. That is focusing on our roads. That's focusing on residential quality of life. That is focusing on our fire and police. Number two, I want a customer service driven city. Joe mentioned that we have a great responsive city commission right now. We want to keep it that way. We want to have a customer service driven city that starts at the city commission and goes all the way down to the people that are sweeping the streets. And then third, we need a fiscally responsible city. And part of fiscal responsibility is being able to communicate those financial numbers to the residents so they understand where their tax dollars are going. And they understand what the priorities of the city are. Because ultimately, when we spend $1, we are telling every one of you where our priorities are. So those are the three things beyond the warm and fuzzy that I want my son Tex to have a great life over the next 20 years here in St. Augustine. And I'll pass it on to John with that.
Again, I agree. You know, one of the things we are blessed with here, most of us came from someplace else, and we fell in love with this thing called St. Augustine. I came here 28 years ago, planned on being here 3 years. I'm still here to run for city commission, go figure. There's a magic here. People ask me what my vision is of St. Augustine. I'm living it. My plans for St. Augustine is to make it better. Now, making it better includes everything that Ron and Todd just talked about, lots and other things. I'm a 5th generation Floridian, a 3rd generation builder. My family developed things in Central Florida, so we were part of the people that changed things in a big way. I recognize what St. Augustine and St. Johns County is facing is change in a big way. It's what I call being loved to death. And we're going to be loved to death, just like we fell in love with this place and made it our home. Other people will do the same thing. We have to have in place what it takes to make them understand that their very presence is going to change it. But if they're not careful, they will do things that will change it dramatically, and we will lose the very thing that makes this town special. It's the people, it's our heritage, and believe it or not, something we never talk about, it's our environment, our natural environment. This is one of the last parts of Florida that's unspoiled. We haven't spoiled Northeast Florida and St. Johns County to the point of mediocrity yet by development. It's coming. Florida fills up from the bottom. It's our turn. What my successful role would be is being the commissioner that helped guide us through this pivotal change time. This is pivotal. We've got to get it right. Change occurs. If you don't control it, you have havoc. If you control it, you have something special. We got it special. We got to keep it special. Let's keep it special.
Okay, we're ready for the next question for seat 3, and Nancy, you'll be first. The mayor should be a standard by which ethics of our city government are measured. How will your conduct model the highest level of ethical behavior?
I have no choice but to be ethical. My dad was in the Navy. Integrity was part of our life, and it's part of how I live my life. It's an interesting thing, the question of ethics. Ethics for the city, to me, is about transparency. So that all of the pieces of information that you need to weigh in on what's going on are available. I would have, transparency takes a lot of forms. Let's just say that all the information that you have is made accessible and easy to you. Look at our website, there are things we can do there. There are all sorts of ways we can have a commission that where the agenda is published, not the day before, thank you very much, but 2 weeks or so in advance so everyone knows what's going on. Another piece of transparency is really, and ethics is about listening to people and talking to people. I would have regular coffees, I would meet regularly with neighborhood groups, meet regularly with business people. That's how you remain ethical. You remember that your job is to represent people. That's what you will be hiring me for. And I understand that, and I take ethics incredibly seriously. Integrity is just what you have to do. In Florida, the ethics law is written very narrowly. It's not broad enough for me. It basically says you're an ethical person in public service unless you deliberately have financial gain as a result of your position. That's not ethics to me. And I think that's all I have to say. It's important. We got to do it.
Well, a lot of you knew me when I was 16 riding a horse dressed like Ponce de Leon on St. George Street. You watched me grow up. Some of you my clients, a lot of you out there, you see me prepare your wills, your estates, your trusts. I'm an elder law attorney. You see me at the Council on Aging as a chairman, as we manage the largest collection of volunteers Kathy Brown put together for Meals on Wheels, etc. You see me every day. You know me. You see me at church. You see me with my mother. You see me all over town. You can tell if I'm ethical or not. As a chairman of the Council on Aging, that's probably one of the greatest things I've been able to be. That's since 1998. And you can't lead an organization like that and not be an ethical person. But she's right. To be an ethical mayor, all you got to do is not take money from clients, not take money from people that want something for your vote. I've never had anybody offer me any money for my vote, so I guess we're pretty lucky. It's a great city. So you'll be the judge, and you see me at parties, you see me out on the town, you see me enjoying a good dinner. It's up to you to judge. Now, not many of you have seen me dance, and so that might be a way that you could say that I have a lackey. So, but it's up to you, and just remember, you know me. Thank you very much.
First, I challenged the mayor's comment about not dancing because he and I did, in fact, dance in the street on St. Patrick's Day. Integrity is something that you have to surrender, and I will never, ever surrender my integrity. My card has something on there and it talks about integrity and talks about ethics. It's the highest level that I have, and that's the fabric of my personality. Having been at the county commission and the federal government working at the White House, that was the highest level of integrity and honesty that you could possibly have. And I continue to guard that and honor that. And it's not just about not taking money from anyone or anything like that or anything of any substance. It's basically, it has to do with your morals, your morals and the morals and the character that you pass on to other individuals. Integrity also means being honest when you talk to people. One of the things that I've been known for is not being politically correct, but I have also been known as being totally honest with you. If you ask me a question, I'm going to give you the right answer. You may not like it, but it's going to be the honest answer because that's part of my personality, that's part of my integrity. So I agree with both Nancy and Joe that those are the things that are highest and held to the highest level. And individuals within the, okay, it's back. But anyway, hello, okay. But that's one of the things that I guard heavily. Integrity, honesty, and basically putting your trust in individuals. And that's all I have to say about it. It's the greatest thing that you can have. And if you don't maintain that, then you have no position in any public position or any position of responsibility.
Okay, seat 4, question 6. When people leave here tonight, what is the one thing you want them to remember about you? Todd. One thing.
I can just follow up what the mayor's panel was just talking about. My dad and I talk about this all the time. Integrity is the absolute epitome of what I want to be remembered for.